The relief is palpable, but perpetual war may not yet be in the rearview mirror.
A huge achievement for us to know that at least this butchery will stop, the killing will stop.
If we return to impunity while Israel continues occupation and apartheid and structural violence, Israeli society is likely to stay in this horror doom loop.
2 years of continuous bombing, tens of thousands of tons of explosives, and then we just stop it. For the globe, it's dangerous if there is no accountability for what happened.
What is your gut feeling? Have we seen the end of the killing? And are we closer to a two-state solution or not? Hello and welcome to the Fourcast. I'm Krishnan Guru-Murthy and we're coming to you today from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv on an extraordinary day that may well turn out to be historic in the long term. There's a real mix of feelings here in the square today. Obviously, there is joy and happiness and an enormous amount of relief, but we've also encountered a lot of people who are exhausted with their worry, exhausted now that they have some sense of relief. And we've spoken to hostage families whose loved ones have already died in Gaza, who are also reflecting on their fury that this war took so long to bring to an end and that their loved ones died while it went on. Well, joining me now is Yousef Hammash, who has worked for Channel 4 News as a producer for many years, in Gaza for a long period of time, but now is based in London, and Daniel Levy, who worked as a negotiator within the Israeli government, but has been a long-time critic of the way the Netanyahu government has handled things. Yousef, let me begin with you. I mean, what I've been asking people all day is, how do you feel?
So no, first, as a Palestinians, we have really mixed feelings of understanding, first of all, what just happened. We woke up on this news that there is an end of the war, but still vague, and no one really understands what's happening next. So it's even I was reaching to my families, my relatives, my friends, my colleagues on the ground. People doesn't really understand what they are going through mentally, because I think now it's an opportunity for Palestinians in Gaza to try to reconcile with what happened the past 2 years, and now it's an opportunity for people to grieve more. And unfortunately, we cannot see an horizon after this. For people in Gaza, they just want stopping the bombing, and I don't think we have a clear understanding for what's coming next. It's a huge achievement for us to know that at least this butchery will stop, the killing will stop. But more than that, people are still lost without any horizon for what's happening next, what's going to happen tomorrow, and understanding of the details of this agreement, and also the lack of trust from Palestinians in Gaza with the international community. And because this is not the first experience, this is the third ceasefire if we accomplished it. And this is there's the huge questions for Gazans now. Are we going to go back for this cycle of violence soon or not? It's another month of truce, or it's a permanent end of this war. Then you will have thousands of follow-up questions about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, Dan, as Yousef says, I mean, today feels historic and it feels different, and everybody here says that, but we have been here before, in truth.
We have, and Yousef captured it so well there in terms of that sense of vagueness, that absence of detail, alongside the huge sense of relief. But there have been ceasefires that broke down before. Israel reneged on them. Israel resumed its attacks. Netanyahu's narrative will lean into victory, but it will also lean into threats. The relief is palpable. Of course, what we just heard about people in Gaza, with all the uncertainty, the prospect that they can look up into the sky and it's a place of hope rather than a place buzzing with drones and bombs. The prospect of the massively, desperately needed humanitarian assistance getting in there, but still this uncertainty. Will the Egyptian border crossing be open, or will it still be controlled by Israelis? Is the IDF still gonna nickel and dime the entry of everything? Of course, you're in Hostage Square, Krishnan, and the sense of relief for those families, for those Israelis being held. some hoping that maybe Israel can turn a leaf. You have the Palestinian prisoners who are going to get out. But this still feels like a first phase. There are details even on the first phase that apparently still need to be nailed down. Assuming everyone is now locked into this, can it hold? Because I would imagine that it's not an unrealistic thing to suggest that wherever the Israeli military withdraws to in Gaza, and the Israelis are saying they'll still occupy more than 50% of Gaza, wherever they withdraw to at the moment of the hostage release is going to be very hard to get them out of after that. And the idea that one can just trust Trump is an awful lot to pin on very little. I think one of the things that has got us over the line is that the mediators from the region, Qatar, Turkey, Egypt, and especially those first two, are able to say to Hamas and to Palestinians more generally, you have seen that we are able to work closely with Trump. This isn't January when it was a leap of faith. We're in October now. You've seen our meetings. You've seen that we were able to bring Netanyahu to that apology. We can get Trump to stick to this, but it still feels like a leap of faith. And of course, Krishnan, at the same time, you've got what's going on in the West Bank, where not only is there no commitment whatsoever, West Bank isn't mentioned in the 20 points, by Israel in terms of its ongoing military actions, its ongoing displacement, its ongoing theft of Palestinian land there. But you can also well envisage a scenario where one of the things Netanyahu says to his coalition allies in order for that coalition not to collapse is watch what I'm going to do elsewhere. We can do our worst in the West Bank while this is going on, and we will be back causing mayhem in Gaza before too long. That's in addition, of course, to the fact that Israel's been bombing in Lebanon, in Syria, what might happen next in Iran. So perpetual war may not yet be in the rear-view mirror.
Yousef, I mean, Israel, as you know, is a very political society. People are engaged on this day to day, and they are already able to have that quite sophisticated political discussion here about what comes now, what is the impact on the Israeli government, what will happen next year in the Israeli elections, what kind of government they want, and whether they believe at the moment in a two-state solution. And the overwhelming feeling here when you talk to people is we're not ready for that conversation yet. We're still engaged with our own political process and getting the hostages back and working out how we feel about what has happened. I mean, for Gazans who have no structure and whose day-to-day existence is just about survival, how do they begin to have a conversation about what kind of leadership they want, what kind of government they want, what kind of statehood they might want?
I think this is an important part of what Gazans are thinking about now. It's so if even ending this war, so we'll get back to the 18 years of siege that we've seen before. We will have a new coalition government, the reconstruction, what that means as a reconstruction process. Reconstructing stones is not only reconstructing the society that have been exposed to all of that, and also what's going to happen next. You are talking about all these details in the agreement about disarming Hamas, getting Hamas out of the current governing of Gaza, but within, and the Israelis also from their side, they're refusing to have the PA because then you have a legit partner at the table that you need to negotiate a statehood or a pathway for a solution. But what's going to happen next for people in Gaza, that's what they think more about. It is just reconstructing Gaza, have the civil infrastructure for human beings to live normal life, health sector that was wiped out, education sector that was wiped out. What they have been exposed to in the last 2 years, they need years just to recover and understand exactly what we've gone through. 92% of the infrastructure in Gaza was destroyed, and houses, and it's basically an unlivable place. So the only thing that they rely on now is a bit of aid so they can survive, improving the living conditions while they are still living in these tents and just scattered in the southern part of Gaza mostly. But what is the political horizon for them? There is nothing. What is the new leadership? The people in Gaza are not really engaged on that, and they don't think about it because they have a different aspect, which is day-to-day queuing for water, day-to-day find food for their children, secure what they need to have a day-to-day life. And the cycle of life, again, is one day. But now there is an opportunity for them first to grieve and to understand what they've gone through. And then we need to think, I don't think it's going to be acceptable for people in Gaza to go through 2 years of hell and then, we just stop the bombing and it's fine then. No, it's not fine. We need a path. We need a horizon for what's going to happen next. Not only reconstructing Gaza, it's not only the issue never been since October 7th. You have 18 years of siege before, you have 7 to 8 years of occupation. There's lots of questions need answers. If the Israeli society, as you mentioned, is not prepared because they are busy with their internal political scheme, also as Palestinians, we need to understand who is representing us as Palestinians. We have never been lucky with a decent leadership to represent us as Palestinians, not only in Gaza. The problem is not only Hamas and it's not only the PA. The problem is the political scheme as Palestinians as a whole need to be revised, and we need, as Palestinians first, we need to understand what we want. Do we want a state on 67, 73, 242 resolution? So far as Palestinians, we don't have a real contribution what's going on for our future, for our horizon, because we have no Palestinians were involved in all of that. Even this 21-point agreement it was Trump and Netanyahu sitting there looking in their interest, and especially mainly the interest of the Israeli government and Netanyahu himself. No one thought about the interest of these Gazans. Okay, stopping them bombing. What next? 400 air truck per day? If you are really serious about a pathway, a solution, a permanent end of this war, you would give an indicator that you want that while allowing aid, talking seriously about improving living conditions here, finding a plan to reconstruct Gaza ethically, not only reconstruct stones. There is no one functioning hospital in Gaza. There is no one school in Gaza. And you have 2 million people going through this. There is no horizon, either from their side, and unfortunately for negotiation team, leadership, Trump administration, no one thought about that. No one thought what we need for people in Gaza.
I mean, the removal of Hamas from the picture is such an article of faith from Israel. But during the course of the military campaign, they drew no distinction between military and civil members of the Hamas administration, and that meant that if you were involved in, the water services or agriculture or civil administration, you were treated as connected to Hamas. Do you think they are now prepared to draw a distinction and accept that there are going to be people who are part of the previous administration who have to be part of the rebuilding in the future now, in this new transitional administration and beyond?
Well, of course, it was the absence of not only drawing that distinction, but also failing to draw any distinction between combatant and civilian. The indiscriminate and disproportionate targeting of the civilian population, which has led to this designation by the UN Commission of Inquiry and many others of this being a genocide, which means that there is a case being heard at the International Court of Justice on the South African motion being put forward regarding genocide, and that's why the Israeli Prime Minister has an International Criminal Court arrest warrant against him for war crimes. And the Israelis have said, the Israeli leadership has said, that there can be no Palestinian governance by anything recognized as Palestinian. And in that 20-point plan, what you actually have is a suggestion for a kind of external, almost imperial colonial blueprint of the outsiders who will rule Gaza, including our former Prime Minister, Tony Blair. So that doesn't sound like it's going to be a moment to acknowledge Palestinian self-governance again. The other images you've seen coming out of these talks, of course, is Hamas is there. The Hamas leadership is there. They've gotten through this. The very people who Israel tried to assassinate last month in Doha are the people who were sitting across the table negotiating this deal, relegating the internationally recognized leadership in Ramallah, President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority to the role of onlookers. I mean, Abbas came out with a statement in relation to the ceasefire, which could have been issued in London or Paris or Berlin. They were that distant from the managing of affairs. So that whole, there's a bit of a chicken and egg, in other words, that on the one hand, Israel doesn't want to deal with Palestinians anyway. But on the other hand, unless Palestinians can create some kind of political renewal and unification and capacity to credibly say, this is who represents us, it will be easier to impose those external structures, and it will be easier for Israel not to go along with that. I think part of the question will also depend on what happens domestically as a result inside Israeli politics, how this plays out now, and perhaps that's something we'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of sort of Netanyahu and his change of position, I mean, obviously everybody says, well, it's Trump. Trump's forced him into this position, but he also had to go along with it. I mean, you know, what kind of threat was he under if he didn't go along with this plan? And what might be in his head? Because, you know, the whole argument has been he's prolonging the war because he wants to stay in power. Ending the war makes his government very vulnerable because the right wing, although they're not collapsing the government yet, they now hold that threat, you know, all through the next few months, and they say that they are opposed to this peace plan. So why has he done it?
So, yes, there is the element of, could he say no to Trump? Was he in a position to do so? Is that more risky? But I think also Netanyahu will feel that he has a victory narrative that he can take out. If he gets these hostages home, he will say, I was told that this couldn't happen. It's only because I stuck to my guns. It's only because we made these military threats. We moved on Gaza City, the things we did before. He will have his victory narrative. In that, he is strengthened by the fact that the American administration is likely to want to assist his victory narrative. He's done what they asked, so now they will likely deliver for him. There's talk of Trump visiting Israel in the coming days, perhaps speaking in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, and he will very likely wrap his arms around Netanyahu and embrace him. Netanyahu is also assisted by the fact that the opposition is very weak. If those coalition allies don't bring him down, then as I suggest, we should probably expect that he is able to still be the war leader, because there are issues with Iran, with Syria, with Lebanon, with the West Bank, and perhaps before too long with Gaza that still need resolving. Hopefully, there is another side to that equation that I've just spelt out for you. Will we at the same time see Israeli society, some of it, enough of it, a growing part of it, say, we don't want to go back to this? Perhaps even something that has failed to really pierce in any significant way mainstream Israeli consciousness of what has been done by them and in their name in Gaza. Will we see yourselves and others? Will we even see the Israeli media reporting on the reality of what's been done in Gaza, on those horrors, being able to access Gaza? Will that change some kind of dynamic, or will something else change the dynamic? And this is also part of the story of why Netanyahu felt he needed to agree to this, which is the pressure that was mounting. It was mounting primarily because people, especially amongst Israel's allies in the West, especially in Europe and elsewhere, were taking to the streets and demanding of their governments to act. And even if those governments were reluctant, you saw the beginnings of a floodgate appearing to open, whether in Italy, whether the fact that countries had to recognize Palestine in response to that public, and then they would probably be expected to do more after that. And Netanyahu spoke of isolation. And today he's suggesting, hey, we're not isolated. And Trump actually turned around and said, hey, you're popular again. I'm not so sure. If we return to impunity while Israel continues occupation and apartheid and structural violence, if we return to impunity, Israeli society is likely to stay in this horror doom loop. If there is pressure, perhaps we will see a different debate inside Israel.
Yousef, how important is accountability to the people in Gaza? You know, are they able to think about that yet? You know, is there a danger that will become the price of development and getting on with the future and making progress in peace talks, that you don't get the day in court?
I agree with what you said. Unfortunately, that's the reality. That no one can hold Israel accountable. We reconcile with that. Even the entire globe, all what it takes them 2 years to convince Netanyahu to stop bombing Gaza. But what comes after that, if we cannot have this experience again. If you have 18 years of siege, end up with October 7th. We all saw what happened. Now, do you think that after this 2 years experience for people in Gaza and there's no one held accountable for what they've gone through, what you're expecting from them more in another 18 years? This is an endless cycle. If it's not about Hamas, you can take off Hamas from the scene. There will be another form of Hamas if you didn't have a clear horizon for that population. And this is, as long you always justifying for these people on the ground to be more radicalized because what they are going through, what they're experiencing. First 18 years of siege away from the occupation where everything was controlled, nothing come in and out, the living conditions that we were going through. Again, I agree with Daniel that we don't have a political horizons as Palestinians. We are not unified. We don't really understand exactly what we want, which kind of state we are looking for. 67, 73, 242, there's all this complexity. And unfortunately, the fragile political society we have as Palestinians is also make us more vulnerable and be more exposed to all of this 2 years of horror. And also, it give a justification for the world, the Arabs, the Israelis, that there's Hamas, there's a PA there. As long we have this fragile political scheme and there is no horizon and a solution for people in Gaza and West Bank for a permanent, long-term solution, this is just one experience and we'll see others.
Let me just ask you both then finally, I mean, what is your gut feeling? You know, have we seen the end of the killing and are we closer to a two-state solution or not? Dan?
Netanyahu has continued to tell us there'll be no two states. There's no one on that Zionist political spectrum who has the prospect of getting into power in the short term that is talking seriously about two states. They're all talking, other than perhaps the leader of the Labour Democrats, Yair Golan, they're all talking about annexation and other things. We've seen the very disturbing and dangerous example that they made great strides in terms of displacing Palestinians, ethnically cleansing, and they may well see, even after war, the opportunity, if things are kept quite desperate, to try and get Palestinians to move out of Gaza and then to replicate that in the West Bank. They set up, the Israelis, in the defense ministry, an authority dedicated to what they called the voluntary transfer of Palestinians. There's a lot of really dangerous, disturbing precedents that have been set and a sense of where they could go with this. I say all that very depressing stuff on what should be a day of greater hope, not just to be the skunk at the party, but because I think it tells us what needs to be avoided and that the very words that Yousef said are never applied here desperately need to be applied, and I believe can be applied, not easily, which is accountability. If Israel sees that they can get away with it, I fear that relatively soon we will be back there. I do hope that from inside Israeli society, a different modus operandi, a different way of thinking about looking at Palestinians is generated, because hope is a security currency. You can't have security under occupation and apartheid. You also can't have security unless there is some hope to those other people. And then there is, of course, that desperately needed change also on the Palestinian side to go through political renewal. I don't think that this is going to rely on Trump. I do imagine that the attention span turns elsewhere relatively fast, especially once the Israeli hostages are released. You didn't even have a reference to the word Palestinians in Trump's Truth Social post. He said everyone will welcome this. Arab, Muslim, Israel, listed the mediators. He didn't recognize that there's such a thing as Palestinians. But where do we draw hope? That I think what has happened in terms of the traction, the shifting of a cultural zeitgeist when it comes to the Palestinians globally, I think that is something that may yet drive forward a challenge to impunity, and hopefully that is something to hold on to and to build on.
Yousef?
I think if there was no accountability for what happened the last 2 years, it's not that mean that it might happen again and you will see that You will see that in other places, because if this gone through as normal thing happened for the last 2 years, watching all of and experiencing as Gazans what's going in Gaza, and the world is just watching, will allow for any dictator, war criminal to do that with that justification. As long as it's been allowed somewhere, it will be allowed many other places. And unfortunately, the international community world had to understand that it shouldn't just be an end of the war. If it's just stopping the bombing, 300, almost tens of thousands of people have been killed. There is no hope for the thousands of injured people in Gaza, and over 60,000 people listed for medical evacuation. 70-80% of the population want to leave because it's an unlivable place, and 2 years of continuous bombing, tens of thousands of tons of explosives, and then we just stop it. And that's not only for Palestinians, it's dangerous. It's for the globe, it's dangerous. If there's no accountability for what happened, then when and how you are going to hold any other war criminal accountable? This is a justification for others. That's why it's really dangerous. It's a dangerous moment. It's a good day to start having hope as Palestinians that this bombing will stop, but then the world have to realize that that's wrong, and there should be accountability.
Thank you both very much indeed. I should say that, obviously standing here in Hostage Square, the people you tend to meet here are not confident that a Palestinian state is anything that is going to be on the agenda, and most of them who I've spoken to today don't particularly want it to be on the agenda right now. They just say it's too soon. At what point it becomes no longer too soon is far from clear, but right now in Hostage Square they are focused on 20 people who are still living in Gaza who they want to get out, and the remains of those who are dead. And so it's a very, very narrow focus in contrast to, I suppose, your focus, Yousef and Dan, on millions of people in Gaza. Thank you both very much indeed for your reflections. That's the forecast for now. Until next time, bye-bye.